usually been said to consist in certain proportions of parts. On considering the matter, I have great reason to doubt whether beauty be at all an idea belonging to proportion. Proportion relates almost wholly to convenience, as every idea of order seems to do, and it must therefore be considered as a creature of the understanding, rather than a primary cause acting on the senses and imagination.
Our business is to inquire whether the parts of those objects which are beautiful in the vegetable or animal kingdoms are constantly so formed according to such certain measures, as may serve to satisfy us that their beauty results from close measures. Turning your eyes to a vegetable creation, we find nothing there so beautiful as flowers, but flowers of every sort of shape and every sort of disposition. They are turned and fashioned into an infinite variety of forms.
How does the slender stalk of the rose agree with the bulky head under which it bends? But the rose is a beautiful flower. Can we undertake to say that it does not owe a great deal of its beauty even to that disproportion?
And with regard to the colors of birds or flowers, for there is something similar in the coloring for both. In their extension for gradation, there is nothing of proportion to be observed. Some are of the primary colors. In short, attentive observer may soon conclude that there is as little of proportion in the coloring as in the shapes of these objects. Turn next to beasts. Examine the head of a beautiful horse. Find what proportion that bears to his body and his limbs. Consider the relations that they have to each other. You have settled these proportions as a standard of beauty. There are some parts of the human body that are observed to hold certain proportions to each other. Before it can be proved, the efficient cause of beauty lies in these. It must be shown that wherever these are found exact, the person to whom they belong is beautiful, either of any member distinctly considered, or of the whole body together. These parts stand in such relation to each other that the comparison between them may be easily made, and that the affection of the mind may naturally result from it. The neck, say they, in beautiful bodies, should measure with the calf of the leg. It should likewise be twice the circumference of the wrist. But what relation has the calf of the leg to the neck, or either of these parts to the wrist? These proportions are certainly to be found in handsome bodies. They are certainly in ugly ones, as any who will take the pains to try may find. The proportions of others in parts very conspicuous, and of great consideration that they differ no less from the proportions we find in living men, of forms extremely striking and agreeable. But to open our view a little, it is worth observing that almost all animals have parts of very much the same nature, and destined nearly to the same purposes: a head, neck, body, feet, eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. Between beauty and ugliness there is a sort of mediocrity, in which the assigned proportions are most commonly found, but this has no effect upon the passions. I believe nobody will think the form of a man's legs so well adapted to running as those of a horse, a dog, a deer, and several other creatures. At least they have not that appearance, yet I believe a well-fashioned human leg will be allowed far to exceed all these in beauty. The stomach, the lungs, the liver, as well as other parts, are incomparably well adapted to their purposes, yet they are far from having any beauty.
On the whole, if such parts in human bodies as are found proportioned were likewise constantly found beautiful, as they are certainly not, or if they were so situated as that a pleasure might flow from comparison, which they seldom are, or if any assignable proportions were found either in plants or animals, which were always attended with beauty, which never was the case, or if where the parts were all adapted to their purposes they were constantly beautiful, and when no use appeared, there was no beauty which, in contrary to all experience, we might conclude that beauty consists in proportion or utility. But since, in all respects, that case is quite otherwise, we may be satisfied that beauty does not depend on these. Let it owe its origins to what else it will.
There is another notion current, pretty closely allied to the former, that perfection is the constituent cause of beauty. This quality, where it is highest in the female sex, almost always carried with an idea of weakness and imperfection. Women are very sensible of this, for which reason they learn to lisp, to totter in their walk, to counterfeit weakness and even sickness. In all this, they are guided by nature. Beauty in distress is much the most affecting beauty. It is of the soft green of the soul on which we rest our eyes, that are fatigued with beholding more glaring objects. A great beautiful thing is a manner of expression scarcely ever used, but that of a great ugly thing is very common. There's a wide difference between admiration and love. The sublime, which is the cause of the former, always dwells on great objects, and terrible. The latter on small ones, and pleasing. We submit to what we admire, but we love what submits to us. In one case, we are forced, in the other, we are flattered into compliance. In short, the ideas of the sublime and the beautiful stand on foundations so different that it is hard, I had almost said impossible, to think of reconciling them in the same subject. But as perfectly beautiful bodies are not composed of angular parts, so their parts never continue in the same right line. They vary their direction every moment, and the change under the eye by deviation continually carry on. And for whose beginnings or end you will find it difficult to ascertain the point. The foregoing description of beauty so far, as taken in by the eye, may greatly be illustrated by describing the nature of objects which produce a similar effect through the touch. This I call the beautiful and feeling. There is a chain in all our sensations. They are all but different sorts of feeling. All bodies that are pleasant to touch are so by the slightness of the resistance they make.
For sublime objects are vast in their dimensions, beautiful ones comparatively small. Beauty should be smooth and polished, the great rugged and negligent. Beauty should shun the right line, yet deviate from it insensibly. The great in many cases loves the right line. Beauty should not be obscure. The great ought to be dark and gloomy. Beauty should be light and delicate. The great ought to be solid and even massive. They are indeed ideas of a very different nature, one being founded on pain, the other on pleasure.